welcome all of you once again. It's Backpack. Well, let me tell you something that as you can see, it is winter time. We are here in December in Cairo, yet you can see a very beautiful sunny day. So this is what's really very important about Egypt, the moderate weather all the year round. This month usually is a month where many people they like to spend their vacation in Egypt, to enjoy their vacation, to enjoy Christmas vacation. So as you can see, really the weather here in Egypt is beautiful, sunny and great. So today we are going to talk more about history and more about ancient sites. But this time I'm going to move on to talk about the religious tourism and more about the most important sites where you can visit here in Cairo.
The Mosque of Amr ibn al-As is the oldest surviving mosque in Egypt and Africa. General Amr ibn al-As was one of the first companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him. After conquering Egypt in 20 AH or 640 AD, he founded its first Islamic capital, Fustat, which falls within the modern city of Cairo. Amr ibn al-As is regarded as one of the most important figures in the history of Egypt because he introduced Islam to Egypt. He founded a new city just north of the Roman fort of Babylon called Fustat. Today, the Mosque of Amr ibn al-As still marks the site of the city. The structure has been renovated several times and none of the original structure remains today. But it is still the site of the oldest mosque in Egypt and the entire continent of Africa. Islam arrived in Egypt and the entire continent of Africa in 640 AD with General Amr ibn al-As of the Rashidun Islamic Caliphate. The religion was only a couple of decades old at the time and expanding quickly with the influence of the Rashidun Caliphate, which had been formed following the death of Prophet Muhammad in 632 AD, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him. Amr ibn al-As and his army came to the area of present-day Cairo in order to attack the fort of Babylon along the banks of the Nile. Camping north of the fort and the settlement around it, the Muslims' army began a siege. What was really interesting about Amr ibn al-As mosque that it was said that while they were camping outside the city, legend says that a dove nested in the roof of the general's tent. After defeating Babylon, the army prepared to move on to Alexandria, the capital of Egypt during the Greco-Roman period. But Amr ibn al-As ordered that his tent is left where it stood, taking the dove's nest as an omen of God's will. The Muslim army captured Alexandria, establishing control over Egypt. But word came from the Caliph Omar in Medina that they should establish a new capital closer to Medina. And heeding the omen of the dove, Amr ibn al-As built a mosque at the site where his tent had stood, and it became the center of the new Muslim capital of Egypt, Fustat. The Mosque of Amr ibn al-As was originally constructed using palm trunks, mud brick, and palm leaves for a roof, so none of the original structure remains, and it has been rebuilt many times since the 7th century. The first arcades of a column were erected in 827, giving it a permanent form that it has since been expanded. Only a small number of these original architraves remain today. Despite the fact that most of its original structure has been replaced, the mosque's historical significance as the site of the first Muslim settlement in Egypt and the first mosque in Africa that still attracts tourists. People tend to visit Egypt because they appreciate the fact that it's a land of antiquity, with ancient pyramids, temples, tombs, and so much more. There is plenty to keep even the most enthusiastic of tourists busy. Most visitors also begin the journey in Cairo simply because there are so many amazing attractions in Cairo. Few buildings or historic sites in Egypt are less than a few hundred years in age, and many are firsts or lasts of their kind. The Mosque of Amr ibn al-As is certainly one of these Egyptian rarities. In fact, it was the very first mosque built in Egypt and throughout all of Africa for that matter.
Many people come to Egypt to visit some of the religious tourism And let me tell you something, that it is not only about worship or praying, no, it is about the building itself. But before you think about visiting mosques in Egypt, you have to think about which one is the oldest mosque. Especially here in Cairo, we have some of these mosques, and we have a mosque that was built, the first mosque that was built in the region. So again, we are talking about the beginning of it. So talking about all these mosques, it has to do with the design, with the architecture, with the dome, with the minarets, many important things to talk about. But before we talk about all these mosques, we need to find out which one was the first mosque that was built in Egypt and in the region.
I'm moving on to find out more about some amazing mosques here in Egypt, whether we are talking about the oldest mosques or the largest mosques. Ibn Tulun is not only the oldest mosque in Cairo in its original form, but also the largest. It also has one of the very few minarets in the world, where the staircase is on the outside and lends to stunning views of the city. Ahmad ibn Tulun was born around 835 AD. He was one of the Turkish commanders in Samarra, located in Iraq. He received his military and theological training in Samarra and Tarsus. Ahmad ibn Tulun founded a new capital, Al-Qata'a, around the hill of Jabal Yashkur or Yashkur Mount, to the northeast of Al-Fustat. And the site chosen for his mosque was a rock outcropping called Jabal Yashkur or Yashkur Mountain. This mosque is not only the oldest intact functioning Islamic site in Cairo, but it's also the third mosque to be constructed for the entire community, and the congregation will join together for the noon prayer every Friday. One can also say that this mosque was a rare, preserved example of the art and the architecture of the classical period of Islam. Its landscape is really huge. It is one of the biggest mosques in Egypt. The mosque, together with the extra empty space between the mosque and the surrounding buffer wall, occupies an area of 6.5 acres. design features an open court or central square that we call it in Arabic Sahr, that is about 92 meters, surrounded by 4 riwaqs. The riwaq of the Qibla contains 5 arcades, while each of the other riwaqs consisting of 2 arcades. The mosque is surrounded by extensions on 3 sides. It is a space meant to separate the mosque from the markets in order to protect the mosque and the prayers from the noise of the street. It has 19 doors on 3 sides, each corresponding to another door in this space, and there are another 3 doors cut into the Qibla's wall. The lintels are composed of palm trunks, boxed with wood and arch above. Some of these doors still retain their original carvings. The foundation slate resides on the right-hand central pier on the 3rd arcade from the Sahr. It includes the foundation inscription, a rectangular slab of marble written in Kufic inscriptions containing some verses of the Holy Quran. Both the walls of the mosque and the empty space are crowned with crenulations, similar to those childhood paper cut out depicting human figures with linked arms. Its courtyard is squared in shape, with each side measuring about 92 meters. The original courtyard was not paved and filled with pebbles, as it is today, because this space was intended for prayers. The Fawara in the middle of the Sahn was the 3rd one created, after the first 2 were destroyed. The first one was the original, built by Ahmad ibn Tulun. It was gilded and stood on 10 columns of marble. The second one was also destroyed, and the current one was built by Sultan al-Mansuri, who also constructed other areas of the mosque. It stands 20 meters in height. The arcades around the courtyard are deeper in the Qibla Riwaq, or the sanctuary side, are formed by pointed arches. Beautiful rosettes and windows form a line of continuous and simple decoration. These arcades are supported by piers, and unlike columns, these piers are rectangular and decorated with four-sided masonry designs. Their capitals have the same bell shape as the bases, and both are plastered and carved. Originally, it appeared that all of the arcades had soffits of curved stucco similar to those restored in the southern arcade. Even the arches are unique. They are pointed and outlined with an edge of carved stucco and spring from oblong supports rounded at the corners by pilasters or engaged columns. This gorgeous sanctuary includes 5 aisles deeper than the others, which are parallel to the prayer niche or the mihrab, and the other riwaq includes just 2 aisles. The main mihrab is in the middle of the Qibla wall. It is the tallest and the only concave one. The others are flat. The first consists of double-pointed arched recesses. Byzantine-style marble columns amaze the eye, adorned with their basket-work capitals. Its stucco molding and the 2 stucco bosses on each side of the arch are original. Even the ceiling of Ahmad ibn Tulun Mosque is really beautiful, as it is composed of palm logs constructed in wooden panels. Below the ceiling, there is a long band with a beautiful inscription carved on sycamore wood, which runs around the whole mosque and contains verses from the Holy Quran. The upper part of the mosque wall is pierced with pointed arch windows and flanked with colonnades. The windows alternate on the outside wall within blind niches adorned with shell conches. There are 128 windows arranged independent of the arches, so that not every arch has a centered window. These arched windows were created to provide light and reduce the weight carried by the arches. The historian Creswell attributes only 4 of the window stucco grills to the Ptolemaic period, those of the plain geometrical design. According to him, the rest display a large variety of more complicated geometrical patterns that date back to the Fatimid and the Mamluk periods. The minaret also is really impressive. It stands on the north side of the ziyada, or the empty space, where a door leads to an unusual stone structure that holds an outer staircase and the Mamluk-style top known as mabkhara.
this, we come to the end of our backpack for today. Thank you all for joining us. Remember, we'll be back. We always say that just consider us as your guide to Egypt to learn where to go, where to visit the important sites, and also how to enjoy your vacation in Egypt.